Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Good morning, everybody. Ruth Ann Zimmerman here for Homesteading with the Zimmermans. And I know that I promised you that we would be in the kitchen and I would be talking about recipes and things like that this week. However, I have one more video to do about gardening and along the same lines of the subject that I had been talking about over my last two videos, and that has to do with that herbicide overspray, the drift that happened to our garden this year. And I'm I appreciate all of your comments and your condolences on the incident. But so don't worry, the video on, I think it's going to be a week on the homestead, and it's just going to be a collection of all the things that we do over a week of time. And yes, there is going to be recipes included. So this morning I am working on catching up on laundry. It's Monday, so it's our regular laundry day, and normally hanging the laundry is something that the kids do this chore. It's a very good chore for them. They can easily handle it. But they are all at Vacation Bible School this morning. So they are having a little bit of a vacation, and I'm hanging the laundry, which I don't mind at all. I actually rather enjoy hanging laundry. So what I wanted to talk about where the garden is concerned is we live in an area that has very fertile soil. Like, things grow. We do not struggle. We don't have to coax things to grow very often. Most things just thrive here. We have a very fertile soil. But what that also means is that we live in the middle of big ag, because it's very easy to grow things here. So we're surrounded by thousands and thousands of acres of corn and soybeans. Like thousands. So this brings me to the first point that I want to make. There is pros and cons to every place that you could move to garden, or every place that you could move to in the US or anywhere in the world for homesteading. There is no perfect state or perfect region for any homestead. Living where the soil is fertile and things grow without a whole lot of effort. We don't have to, constantly be amending our soil. I mean, we do. We fertilize. We are very conscious of not depleting the nutrients in the soil. But that's a huge pro. And I've always said, if God would ask us to move anywhere, I would get down on my knees and I would pray and I would beg and plead for it to be a place that has good fertile soil. So that's a huge pro for me, is the fertile soil here in Iowa. But with every pro, there is a con. So the con to that is what we have experienced. The overspray and the herbicide drift that comes with living in the middle of big ag. So a solution to that, if we don't want to, so a solution to living in big ag is we could buy up all the land around us, which that's not a very, that's not, that's not real likely to happen. Another solution is we could plant between us and the closest fields. We could plant trees and bushes that would catch most of the herbicide drift. And that is something that we could do, and that would probably protect us a whole lot longer than making the farmer pay for damaging our property and our crops. Because you just never know, in a year or two that field could belong to somebody completely different. Somebody else could be farming it, and you'd be back you'd be back to square one. And the other thing with big ag is the person that owns that field does not farm it. You have these huge crop owners that, you know, own 100,000 acres, but they don't actually farm it. They rent it out. And so the person that's farming the field does not own the land. So there's that, a little bit of a disconnect there too, that you, like the neighbors that you see in the field aren't actually the land owners. So that's how big ag works here in our area. Because we're in a Mennonite community, there's definitely a lot more small owner-operated farms than there is in some areas. But the Mennonites are definitely not big ag as much as they are in some areas. The Mennonite farms are owner-operated, and if you see them in the field, it's usually their land. Anyway, that was one set of pros and cons for living where we do. So another pro and con for gardening where we do is, so the con is that our growing season is really short. So our last frost date in the spring is usually May 15th, and our first frost date in the fall is September 15th. So that's a fairly short growing season. But what that means, so that's a con. Like, I have, in my 20 years of gardening here in this area, I have never gotten a full tomato crop, because our tomatoes usually don't start producing until late August, and then they've got about a month before frost kills them. So that's a short growing season. And most crops we get a one-shot chance at, which means if you have a crop failure, you don't have time to plant another crop and try again. So that being a con, the pro to that is our winters are long and cold. And what that means is that most bugs and pests and diseases in the garden are going to freeze out. We have very few bugs that survive the winter here in our area. They freeze out. However, if I let my garden covered up with straw and other organic matter, the bugs do survive, because that organic matter insulates them where they don't freeze out. So if you see my garden laying completely bare as we head into winter, that is one of the reasons I do it. Now, commercial growers, like in our area, produce growers, like they might cover their strawberries, but that's okay because they don't mind spraying for bugs and blight the next spring. I don't want to spray my strawberries, so I'll leave them uncovered. And you might be able to find some videos from a couple years ago where I did cover them, but then I ran into the problem where they blighted and I didn't want to spray them, so I lost the crop. So now I would rather lose some of my strawberries to the cold weather and not have to spray them for blight and diseases. Where was I? I was talking about the pros of our long cold winters are the fact that it freezes most bugs and diseases. So let's say potato bugs, those will overwinter, but not enough where they can consume an entire crop. Like a lot of them will die in the winter. You'll still have some, but if we pick them all off and don't give them chance to reproduce all season long, we can easily stay on top of the Colorado potato beetles and they don't consume our entire crop. How do the bugs get here when we do have bugs? Here's the thing, they usually arrive in, like say if the South has hurricanes and storm systems, and it pushes all the way up into the Midwest, that's when we see like a lot more Japanese beetles and like cucumber beetles and squash bugs. So they arrive with weather systems. I remember one summer, like I didn't even know what an army worm was. And one summer we had a huge weather system move in from like say Texas and the Gulf area. And suddenly we had army worms and everybody had to spray their hay fields so that they could get a crop. And what happened was it looked like the cows still had pasture to eat, but they were standing at the fence mooing at me, and I'm like, this is so odd, I don't know what's wrong. So we went to check, and sure enough, the entire pasture, like everything was just covered with armyworms, and they didn't want to eat it. So those types of things, like those bugs and things like that, often arrive from the South. But even if they go into the soil and try to overwinter, they're not very successful at overwintering in our soil here because of the 30 below temperatures that we get. So one of the cons, another con of living here where it gets so cold in the winter, and this is kind of a touchy one for me, is we can't grow peaches. We can grow apples and plums and sour cherries and pears, but we can't grow peaches. And Elvin and I both grew up in much warmer climates, so we know what a fresh peach right off the tree should taste like. You know, when you eat it right off the tree and the juice is just running everywhere, and it's the best thing you could eat all summer long. And we've tried growing peaches here, and people will tell you that yes, there is peach trees that are hardy in Iowa. And people will tell you, yes, there is peach trees that are hardy to zone 4. But guys, I tell you, right here on our property, peach trees will die. That just means that you have to know your own little microclimate on your property. And we have tried peach trees, and they do not survive. Like, it gets too cold right here where we're at. A couple hours south of here, yes, they can grow peach trees, but we can't here. And if you find somebody, if you have a neighbor that says, oh yeah, we have a peach tree, you always ask them, well, how long have you had it? And almost always, the answer is less than 6 years. You will be hard-pressed to find anybody that has a peach tree that's 15, 20 years old. because there will be, without a doubt, there will come a winter that takes those peach trees. So that's probably one of my biggest cons to gardening where we live. Okay guys, I have got the laundry all hung up, and it is high time for me to harvest these garlic scapes. So that's what we're going to work on next. And the thing is, do I hate that our garden got herbicide drift? And does it disappoint me? Does it discourage me? Yes to all of those things. And guys, you know it, because this is the third week in a row that I'm here talking about this. So when you're harvesting garlic scapes, they're kind of like asparagus. This bottom part's going to be real woody. You just want to save the soft part. So I'm going to be snipping off some of the harder parts. And I only want to save the nice soft parts. Okay, so back to the herbicide drift. I hate it. Does it make me doubt the purity of my own food that I'm raising? Yes, it really does. However, all of this that I'm raising, that we're working so hard together as a family to produce, it's still better than buying it from the grocery store. I still trust my garden more than I trust the grocery store, and I'm not going to throw it all out because it got herbicide drift. I'm still going to believe that this is still better than what I could buy at the grocery store. Now, the other thing that I've been thinking about a lot is there is no perfect scenario in the world. We live and operate in a fallen world. There is no perfect place to garden. There is nowhere that you could go in the world that your garden wouldn't have problems, because you're gardening in a fallen world. So that brings everything into perspective, and it helps me focus on what is eternal. So relationships, number one, relationships are eternal. And the souls, relationships are eternal because through relationship you touch eternal souls, and you can influence those souls towards the kingdom of God. So the biggest takeaway for me when something like this happens, because guys, this is not the first time this has happened. This is just the first time you've been here. I brought you all alongside as we process what happened. The biggest takeaway for me is my language and attitude towards the people that spray their fields. And that's what God is mostly concerned about, is my response to all of this. And not only for the good of my heart, but because I have children that are watching how I respond. And that is how they are going to learn to respond to people that do them wrong. So watching my language, making sure that yes, it's okay that I'm disappointed. It's okay that I'm upset. But to not attack the very character of the person that did us wrong. Like that person, the farmer that sprayed, he's somebody's son. He has a mother somewhere. And he's also loved by God. So that's been my absolute biggest takeaway, is making sure that I have an attitude that encourages my children to be grace-filled when somebody does them wrong. To have an attitude of forgiveness, because the garden's not eternal. Every year, there's going to be something that comes up that we don't like. And I think because I think when it's bugs and disease and blight, we tend to be more grace-filled because we know that it's out of our control. And we know we have more of a God allowed this to happen, I can deal with it kind of attitude when it comes to natural things that affect our garden. Whereas when God's people make mistakes and do things to our garden, we aren't as forgiving. So that is two things, two character building lessons that I am trying to take away from this, is to remember that there are no perfect places to garden in the entire world. No matter where I would go to garden, I would run into issues, and there would be things that I don't like, things that affect me, make me sad and disappointed and discouraged. And number two is the garden is not eternal. The children and the people around us, the souls that we touch, that is eternal. So making sure that that is my priority. Those relationships should be priority. Look at all these beautiful garlic scapes. As happy as I am with these garlic scapes, and as delicious as they're going to make some of our food, there is no eternal value in a perfectly pure garlic scape. Did this one get herbicide drift? It probably did. What am I going to do about it? Well, I'm very likely going to soak them in some vinegar, because soaking them and washing them in vinegar could help. I'm not saying it does. Could help to neutralize some of the things that are on the garlic scapes. But other than that, I'm just going to keep my joy intact, and I'm going to keep gardening like my garden is a gift from God. And I'm not going to try to control things that are out of my control. That every day that I get to spend in the garden, and every day that I come to the garden and I harvest something, this is a gift from God. This is straight up a gift from God, and I am not going to let it be tarnished by the thought of herbicide drift, even though I know that this garlic probably got some herbicide drift on it. We're not going to throw it out. We're going to accept it for the gift it is, and we're going to remember that we live in a fallen world, and that we want to take as many people with us to the eternal kingdom as we can. So just a little note to moms that are gardening with your children. Your garden is not more important than your children. Yes, I know that the garden brings you food, but it's not going to save their souls. So when you go work in the garden, when you take them with you, remember that relationships are primarily built on shared experiences. So turn your garden work into a shared experience, because that is what builds relationships. And when I say a shared experience, I mean a positive shared experience. So I'm challenging all you young moms to turn your gardening, make sure that you're gardening while gardening with your children, you are building on that relationship because shared experiences build relationships. The more positive shared experiences you can create, the stronger and better your positive relationship will be. So here again, working in the garden with you and eating the healthiest and most pure food ever is not going to save anybody. It is through relationship that we can touch people's lives and inspire them towards the eternal afterlife. And point number 2, there is no perfect place to garden in the entire world. What makes a beautiful life is not a perfect life. What makes a beautiful life is knowing when to stop and notice beautiful moments. That's what creates a beautiful life. And our life, I think our life is beautiful. But it's not because it's perfect. It's because I remember to slow down and savor those beautiful moments. Even though there's weeds, I can still enjoy my garden. Even though there was herbicide drift, it's still a beautiful garden to me, and I can still be overcome with joy at the fact that I get to garden and grow food for my family. All right, guys. Thank you for coming to my, I think they call them a TED Talk. But anyway, this is it. This is all that I'm going to say about the herbicide drift over my garden. I thank you guys for being here for 3 weeks in a row and helping me process this and come to a conclusion where I can store it in my mind as a character building event, and I'll know for next time something like this comes up, I'll draw from this experience. But thank you guys for listening to me as I process all of this. It really does help when you talk things out, because it helps it to become less of an issue in your mind when you hear yourself talk about things. We'll be at the Murray Fest this weekend. For those of you that are going to be there, please come say hi. And then the following week, the week after Murray Fest, so the week of the 4th of July, we will have guests on the homestead the entire week, and then the following week as well. So we've got 2 weeks of guests coming up on the homestead. I am going to do my best to be here with a video both of those weekends, both of those Saturdays. But if you don't see me, remember, go onto our community page here on YouTube, and I will be there with an update. But until then, happy gardening, guys.